Alright guys, real quick, just going to use this opportunity to shill my other platforms. You can find all my links on my Linktree page. The main pages I'm going to be using other than YouTube are going to be Minds, Odyssey, BitChute, Rumble, and Truth Social. So if you guys want to give me a follow over on those other platforms, I'd really appreciate it. But without further ado, let's get into the video. Alright everyone, got another video here for you today. I'm going to start trying to get back into the swing of making at least one, possibly two videos a day. And whether that be about politics or the Eagles, I'll just kind of play that by ear depending on what's going on. And I do plan on covering the Eagles this season a lot more than I did last season. So I will be making videos on the Eagles if you guys are interested in that content, but it probably won't be as much Eagles content as in the past just due to wavering interests and all of that. But yeah, this video today, I don't really have a script for this one, but this was just a video that I've had an idea to make for quite a while, just been mulling it over. So if you'll bear with me on this one, this is going to just be more of a kind of an off the rails type video. No articles to source, nothing like that. This is more just my current thoughts on the political situation in the United States and the world, and the rapidly declining morality of society in the 21st century. And as you guys know, a lot of our belief systems nowadays are based on postmodernism. And essentially what that is, to the best of my understanding, is that we had the modernity period, which focused mostly on the advancements of the Enlightenment. And these are things like objective truth, morality, and a big one for me is binary opposition, which essentially just admits, it's kind of like the yin and the yang theory is the way that I think about it, which in many ways postmodernism rejects, because postmodernism is more about collectivism than individuality. And in no way is this more apparent than the transgender movement, where they're basically trying to eliminate all genders. And effectively, in my opinion, they're just eliminating women, period, because they can't even define a woman now. So that's a good example. And this is in everything, you know, light, dark, good, evil, you know, man, woman, masculine, feminine, clean, dirty, you know, like literally everything in life. Even if you like look at your human body, right? Like everything in life operates on pairs and binary. So if you try to eliminate that, you're going against nature, and that's a big part of postmodernism, which I'll get into shortly. I mean, even the term binary, a lot of people know, if you have any kind of coding background, is that it's essentially ones and zeros. And that's how everything happens on the computer. Like me making this video right now and you watching it. This was all compiled between a 1 and a 0 on-off switch. So 2. But not to get too much off the rails here. Essentially what the new postmodernism, and I call it new because it is a very new age way of thinking, but postmodernism originally was meant to challenge the Enlightenment rationality, and the Enlightenment rationality led to things like the scientific revolution, the works of Francis Bacon, Rene Descartes, if you guys know who that is. He's one of the original simulation theory philosophers. If you guys don't know what that is, I'd highly recommend a book by John Baudrillard in the 1980s. It's titled Simulacra and Simulation. And for all of you movie buffs out there, actually, that was the book that was the basis for the Matrix trilogy. So, fun little fact there. A lot of you probably already know that. But really, to me, what the Enlightenment actually was, and why I think it was so important, is that it was basically trying to establish a set of rules for reality. And this can go off into the woods quite a bit, but essentially the way that I look at it is there's a lot of stuff in the universe and on the planet that we just can't understand without measuring it, and we still probably don't fully understand it. However, we do need measurements to keep us from going insane, and that's the way that I think about it. And these are things like time, gravity. Like we need to be able to observe the natural occurrences of the reality around us and be able to explain them in some way. And the biggest problem with postmodernism is that it rejects a lot of those ideas and instead just creates confusion by questioning every single thing, every established norm, right? Like women acting like women is a societal construct, men acting like men is a societal construct, instead of just looking at it and saying this is human nature. Because in my opinion, that is what postmodernism fundamentally fails at, is observing natural human nature. In human nature, things just are the way they are, and there's not really rationality or reason behind a lot of it. It's just the way it is, and the real goal of the Enlightenment was to try to rationally explain it. Another really good book on this topic, I read it a long time ago. I think it came out in like 2008, really old book, but it's called Predictably Irrational by Dan O'Reilly, and the book was really good at showing human nature. It does attempt to make some semi-postmodern arguments in the book, but it also kind of shows how people are very emotional. That's like a really big thing. And I think the attempt of the Enlightenment was to add a little bit more rationality, right? There's like the pure pragmatic rationality of Niccolo Machiavellian, right? Like the ultimate pragmatist. And then there's like the utter emotionality, which is a big focus of postmodernism. So really that's the way I look at it. It's the two extremes. The Enlightenment, though, had a very Christian background, which I've talked about this in previous videos, but that's something that postmodernism and the new atheism movement that created a lot of this failed to account for. And I think that's a big problem, because now we have the new state religion of the woke. And so they basically tore everything down from the Age of Enlightenment and just replaced it with their own makeshift stuff, which they didn't really, I don't think they intended woke to be a thing. In their pursuit for equity and equality and ending racism and ending sexism and just all those buzz terms, you know, saving the environment, I think that this just Franken monster of the woke was created. But yeah, to get on point, we're about 6 minutes into the video now. The point of this video, I guess, is I'm trying to diagnose society in terms of a cancer. And so I'm trying to understand what stage of cancer we may be in, as far as, is it early stage cancer where we can still treat it and you know, recover from it, albeit it causing damage to the vital organs? Or are we in stage 4 cancer where we basically just have to go through this and die from it? And in terms of society, that would mean picking up the pieces after the death and trying to form some kind of rebirth in the process. And what made me think about this is really the morality of the world. I've talked about it in previous videos as well, about how the left, as far as sexuality goes, they pretty much only have this thing called consent now, which is kind of like the gentleman's contract or the social contract theory. And so it's essentially, they have this sacred cow called consent, but everything else is obligatory to them, which really shows the decay of morality. And I have a lot of sympathy. I'm not just trying to demonize people, because a lot of these people, like especially women in the modern age, have just been utterly lied to and gaslit for so long, and this has been like a generational thing. I'd say it started probably with the boomers really in full swing, but you know, the Gen X and the millennials, and then now Gen Z, they almost have no shot as far as the propaganda that they have been submitted. I'd say Gen X did, but millennials, we're largely the propagators of the propaganda. And disclaimer, I am a millennial. But then the Gen Zers, which is the current generation, they're the ones that they almost grew up in a world where they didn't have a choice but propaganda. We have tons of knowledge on the internet, but if you just go into it trusting the institutions, which a lot of people do when they're younger, because you know, you don't want to think that the whole world is lying to you right when you start trying to make something of yourself. So you go to school and you get a job and you pay taxes and you like to think that you're doing it for the betterment of society, but really it's just massive propaganda against human nature. And so I'm not trying to get into the political aspect of that, but essentially with women, what I'm observing the most is that, you know, consent is this sacred cow. As long as you agree to sex, you're okay. But then we have things like the Me Too movement now, which you can't verifiably prove a lot of the accusations. And I feel like women use this a lot now to get a payday, because one of the big consequences with the sexual revolution is that men and women no longer have an incentive to pair bond because essentially the state gives women money through welfare. There was this really funny meme that I read a while ago where it showed a picture of women's preferences by penis size, and it had I think Asian was at the very end of one spectrum, and then you had white in the middle, and then you had black, and then the biggest penis of all was government welfare. So I thought that was very funny and very much described a lot of the problems that are going on with modern women. But yeah, so because of the sexual revolution, it's de-incentivized men and women to pair bond and create healthy families because we've subsidized that. I mean, this even goes to the school system, where we've subsidized our children to daycare, and essentially what schools, public schools, have become is nanny daycare facilities where they teach your kids about critical race theory and all the genders of the rainbow now. And we really didn't understand this as a society really until 2020 when everybody got locked down. But this has been going on for a very long time, and again, people just kind of trusted the system. We took it for granted that men and women are really the core of society, the family structure, and if you just neglect that and try to subsidize it, like Hillary Clinton said, where it takes a village or whatever, if you try to go off of that retarded way of thinking, you're going to get to the current state that we're in, which is rapid societal collapse. I always forget the quote, but basically something like it'll happen slowly, and then all at once. That's kind of what 2020 felt like. It was like everything felt like it was collapsing all at once, but really this has been a buildup since probably the 1970s, really. Reagan kind of stopped a little bit of it for like one term, but then you had the Clintons, the Bushes, the Obamas. So this has been going on for a very long time. This nanny state, this government controls and runs your life type mentality, and people are just now waking up to that. And so the real point of the video, guys, is people are waking up, but I'm just wondering if it's too late. Obviously, the 2022 midterms are going to tell a lot about the fight for this country. I made a video on the disastrous Joe Biden speech recently about how he was basically calling half of the country semi-fascists, to use his terminology, which is just a dangerous precedent. And this comes right after the FBI raid of Trump's Mar-a-Lago home. So we've effectively entered Banana Republic territory, because Trump himself also called Joe Biden an enemy of the state in one of his rallies recently. So we really are at that point now. We're not at civil war, but we are at that point where the country is equally divided. But I guess I'm wondering this, and you guys feel free to comment down below with your thoughts. I'm wondering if it's really just the clash of the elites that we're seeing, because obviously there's like elites that have one interest, and then there's elites that have another. We're seeing this a lot with Putin. He's kind of like rejecting the EU model. And then Klaus Schwab, he has his own visions. But I'm basically wondering if it's just elite infighting and the people are kind of just a casualty, or if the people really are that radical, where they are going to be like almost a 50-50 split. If you think about the Revolutionary War, it was a 1/3 split. You had the loyalists to Britain, and then you had the Sons of Liberty, which were the founding fathers, and then you had I forget what they were called. I think they were called the Loyalists, actually. I think I messed that up. The Loyalists were the ones that didn't really care. They were apathetic. And then you had the British, which we were fighting, and then you had the Sons of Liberty. So that was a 1/3 split, and the Sons of Liberty were very outnumbered in many regards. And so, getting back on track here, I guess I'm just wondering, like I said, the big pondering question here for me is that, are the citizens as divided as the politicians are making it seem? Because we know for sure the politicians are divided, and we know the government is trying to push all sorts of crazy stuff on the people. And again, this just goes back to ideology. There's like a postmodern type ideology going on, and then there's a resurgence of the Age of Enlightenment going on, which they call it NRX, or neo-reactionary. So there's two kinds of movements. I would probably say I'm more of an NRX side, as you guys obviously can tell by my videos at this point. But what are the people thinking, right? Because the left always talks about democracy, but it really doesn't mean anything to them. And then the right will talk about the republic, but a lot of right-wingers don't really care about that either. So it's just a political usage of our language. They're just taking our language and perverting it in a way where it just causes confusion because they just use words that sound good. You know, you heard them in history class in high school, so they must be somewhat reliable to use for everything. And then just to kind of wrap the video up, I'll give my opinion on it. Personally, this is just me. It's kind of a white-pilled view, I guess. Personally, I think that the people are waking up, and I think that a lot of people are rejecting the postmodern view now once they're getting the facts. And so I think that the politicians, especially the left, they're going to really try to push people. You know, there's like false flags that can go on, all sorts of things like that. They're going to really try to push people to be violent or whatever you want to call it. You know, January 6th, in my opinion, was a bait and switch. The left wanted people to show up on January 6th because then they could have something to hang over the head of MAGA. But I just have faith, I guess, that people are waking up to the tactics of the deep state and that we aren't going to be falling for it for much longer. But that brings the really scary question, is that since the government in many ways is almost irreconcilable at this point, it's going to be a power grab, guys, and it's going to get crazy. Like, I'm calling 2024 the political year from hell. I'm going to enjoy the ride, but it's definitely going to be dicey because you also have Vladimir Putin up for re-election that year. And if you know any history about Vladimir Putin, he's basically rigged himself into office like 3 or 4 separate times. So every time that happens, there's a really good book called Winter is Coming by Gary Kasparov. I don't really agree with a lot of things that Gary Kasparov says, but the book Winter is Coming gives a really good insight into what's going on with Putin. And then another book that I didn't really love because I don't really like Timothy Snyder. He's like a raving leftist, but it's called The Road to Unfreedom. And the book is very pretentious, but it does manage to give you a little bit of nuggets of insight into what goes on in Russia, even though the book is largely about the Steele dossier Trump collusion hoax. It really perpetuates that lie. So yeah, really long video. Thank you guys for watching this far. I think, to sum it up quickly, the people are rejecting it and uniting, but the political class, the elites, are not going to go out easily. They're not even going to allow themselves to be elected out of office, many of them at this point. I mean, I don't know about in the States. I'm talking about across the world. There's a lot of people that are, you know, sinking their foot into the mud, I guess, so to say. They're putting their stakes in now, and it feels like a very World War I type situation in that regard, where you have this old way of thinking that's just very entrenched, but it's time to move past that. And in a weird way, we're not really advancing to a new progressive state. We're kind of going back to basics, like we're going back to an age of enlightenment, as James Lindsay calls it. The second enlightenment is what he calls this going on right now, where we're just going to kind of reject postmodernism and go back to a more rational way of thinking. But anyway, guys, I've rambled on long enough. The video is almost 20 minutes. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments. If you're new to the channel, please go ahead and subscribe, and also please like the video. It really helps the algorithm. YouTube is just kind of a mess here. I don't really care that much about YouTube, honestly. I'd rather you guys get on those new tech platforms like Rumble and Odyssey, but YouTube is where most of the audience is, so I will continue making these videos on YouTube as well as my many other platforms. So thank you guys again so much for watching, and this has been Jigsaw0097. I'll talk to you all later.